Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's card making video, we're going to be creating a panel with this gorgeous wow embossing powder. This is the Metalline Himalayan Musk and it's absolutely gorgeous. And then we're going to be foiling over the top of our embossing powder. Yes, you can foil over the top of your embossing powder, so that's going to be quite exciting today. I've got a piece of Wow Superior Smooth White cardstock and I've cut this down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I've got a scrap of white paper underneath and I'm going to be using my Wow Embossing Ink Pad, and we're going to ink up that whole panel and cover it in that Himalayan Musk embossing powder. For the focal images that I'll be using today, I'm going to be using this Gina design stamp set. This is the delightful Daisies stamp set. It is an absolute favourite of mine at the minute, so it may be appearing in a few more videos yet. But first, let's go ahead and take our embossing ink pad and we're going to cover that panel of white cardstock using the embossing ink. So we're just getting a full coverage on this card. Now today I'm just showing you using one embossing powder. You could of course do this technique with multiple different colours. You could create a lovely rainbow background with embossing powders, or you could create an ombre effect. So yeah, there's lots of different things that you could do with this technique. As you can see there, I've not got very good coverage the first time round, so I'm just going to go ahead and heat set that. I've got my heat tool on the hottest setting. I'm using my Cork Mat, which does help with warping, and I'm just holding it down with some tweezers. And then once this is heat set, we can go ahead and ink up that panel again using the embossing ink and then add more embossing powder over the top. Part of the reason for the poor coverage, I think, is because my embossing ink pad is a little bit dry. So I've got the re-inker from Wow, and this is like a rollable ink refill. So if you've not used it before, I'm just going to show you slowly how I ink up my ink pad. You just literally use the rollerball and just run it over your ink pad. You might take a little bit just to get the rollerball moving on the bottle, but once it is, you'll soon see that you're using up some of the ink. You'll get little bubbles going up the bottle, and then you'll get a nice juicy ink pad at the end of it. So this is something to bear in mind. If you're struggling with your embossing, maybe your ink pad needs re-inking, and it doesn't hurt just to add a little bit more ink and then go ahead and try again. So you'll see this time when I pour the powder on, I get much better coverage. So yeah, it definitely needed re-inking. So once I've gone ahead and covered that panel again with the Himalayan Musk, I'm going to go ahead and tip the excess back in the bottle, bring in my Cork Mat again and just give that another heat set. And again, if you notice that there's a little small area that you've missed, for example in that top right hand corner there, while the embossing powder is still hot, you can go ahead and just dip it in the embossing powder, and then you can just heat set that again without the need to kind of add any ink. So here I'm just keeping it hot and then I'm just tipping the powder over it and heat setting it again. You'll see there's a slight colour variation because obviously that's had almost like a third layer, but with the technique that we're doing today, it really won't matter. You're not going to see that in the end. So there's our lovely heat embossed panel. Now to go ahead and add foil onto the top of it, today I'm going to be using the Indigo Blue Flitter Glue. Now this is a tacky glue and there are others on the market. For example, the Cosmic Shimmer do a flake and glitter glue, so I'll link that in the description box below if you can't get your hands on the Indigo Blue one. But I'm just adding some of the glue to this sponge. This is just a piece of fat foam, so it's like sponge on the bottom and hard on the top. And I'm just using a palette knife just to push that glue into the sponge. We're just using it like it's going to be an ink pad, so we just want to get a nice coverage on there. So once that's done, I'm then going to go ahead and bring in this lovely daisy stamp from that Gina stamp set, the delightful Daisies. And I'm just going to go ahead and use that sponge to ink up the stamp. Now you'll see that the glue is like a creamy white colour, so you'll just about see it. And when we go ahead and stamp it, you can see the stamped image on top of the embossed panel that we've created. You want to be careful here because obviously the embossing powder is a little bit slippy and you don't want to get any smudged stamping, but you can see there that lovely crisp image. Now you'll be able to just keep going with the sponge without needing to re-ink it with the glue for a good several attempts. In fact, for all of the stamping that I did today, I didn't need to add any more glue to the sponge, so you'll get a fair few stamps out of one inked up sponge, as it were, from the glue. But there you can see our lovely stamped out panel. So now we can go ahead and add the foil. I'm using the Wow Fab foil today. So this is a toner reactive foil, not a hot foil. So that's why we can use it with this technique. There are other brands that have toner reactive foil on the market, for example, the Crafters Workshop. I haven't tried those foils, but they definitely do work with these kind of similar techniques. And so once you've added the foil to your panel, it'll cling to the areas where the glue is. Now I'm just using my bone fold tool here just to add lots of pressure. You can run it through your die cutting machine just with some standard plates and an extra shim to give the extra pressure, or you can just use a bone fold tool or something similar just to press the foil into the card. And you can see when the foil's stuck to the pattern, you'll see the pattern just coming through the foil there. So then we can just peel off the foil and reveal the pattern, and it's just so pretty. This is so easy to do. You don't need any kind of special machines to do this kind of foiling, and it just gives such a beautiful effect on a card panel. So if you notice any little bits of foil that have perhaps got stuck to the areas where the glue is, but then they're kind of overlapping areas where there wasn't, just take a little paintbrush, rub it over the area, and then that'll just take off any little loose bits of foil and just make sure that your image is nice and crisp. So there we go, there's the finished panel. So next I'm going to go ahead and attach it to my card base. I'm using a 5.5 by 4.25 inch card base today. So I'm just going to trim this panel down to 4 inches by 5.25. And this is always a good thing to do. If you've made the panel slightly bigger, you can always just go ahead and trim off the areas that perhaps not as crisp as you'd liked. I'm going to add a sentiment on a strip of vellum, and I'm going to use the sentiment that says thank you for being a friend. I'm going to heat emboss this in white embossing powder. So again, I'm just going to take my anti-static powder bag here and just make sure that there's no static on the vellum. Then I can go ahead and ink up my stamp with the Embossing Ink Pad, and I'm using the lines on my mat to help me make sure that my sentiment's nice and straight on the vellum. So that's a neat little trick if you're using vellum and you're worried about lining up your stamp and keeping it straight. Use some grid lines because obviously you can see through the vellum because it's slightly transparent. So I've added some Superfine white embossing powder from Wow, and I'm just heat setting this with my heat tool on the hottest setting, and then I'm just working out whereabouts I want that. Now I do have quite a bit of warping on the panel because we've heat embossed it twice and it's a full panel of heat embossing. So I'm just going to use my magnets just to hold that down. Make sure that I'm using my grid lines to make sure the vellum is straight on my card panel, and then I can just go ahead and wrap that around. I'm going to use some double-sided tape just to hold that in place, and then once I've got that one side in place, I can go ahead and just line up the other side, make sure it's nice and straight, and then go ahead and do the same, wrap it around and add some double-sided tape. I'm just going to trim off the excess vellum there as well because we don't want any bulk on the back of our card. And then once that's all stuck down, I'm going to go ahead and add some foam tape to the back of this panel. So once I've added foam tape all around the edges, I'm going to add lots in the center as well. That will just really help with the warping that we've got. And then when I remove the backing tape, I'm just going to add some glue as well so that we've got a little bit of wiggle room just to make sure that we can stick that down nice and centrally on our card blank. I'm going to go ahead and add a few little enamel dots on the front of this card, and then that is the finished card for today. So thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that this has given you some inspiration of ways that you could use foil over the top of your embossing powders. As always, I'll leave all the products that I've used in the description box below. And if you'd like to see more from my channel, then please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button as well if you've enjoyed this tutorial, and leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.